For more than 300 years, a single empire just dominated South Asia. It created this legacy of, well, staggering wealth, breathtaking art, and a complex political world that completely reshaped the subcontinent forever. This is the story of how a band of Central Asian warriors became the rulers of one of the world's richest empires. This is the story of the Mughals, their explosive rise, their golden age, and their ultimate ruin.
All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to chart the entire arc of the Mughal Empire. First up, we'll see how it was forged with a new kind of weapon, gunpowder. Then we'll get into its golden age, the height of its power and culture. After that, we'll look at the empire when it was at its absolute biggest and see how the cracks started to show. Then we'll follow its long, kind of dramatic decline, and finally, we'll explore the powerful legacy it left behind for all of us. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1526. We have a ruler from Central Asia named Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, no less, and he's got his eyes set on the plains of North India. Now, he was ambitious, for sure, but his army was massively outnumbered. He had a secret weapon, though, a new kind of technology that was about to change the rules of war on the subcontinent.
And this right here shows you just how lopsided this fight seemed on paper. Ibrahim Lodi, the Sultan of Delhi, had this huge, traditional army. We're talking war elephants, cavalry, the works. But Babur, even though he was outnumbered, brought cannons and matchlock guns, tech he'd learned from the Ottomans. And at the Battle of Panipat, that technological edge was everything. The sound and the sheer force of the gunpowder just shattered Lodi's army. And just like that, the Delhi Sultanate fell.
So Babur wasted no time. He quickly solidified his hold, even defeating the powerful Rajput Confederacy. But, the early empire was pretty fragile. Babur died just 4 years after his big victory, and his son Humayun was actually driven out of India into exile in Persia. And yet this setback had a kind of silver lining, because when Humayun finally came back to reclaim his throne, he brought with him this deep and lasting Persian cultural influence that would define the Mughal court for centuries to come.
And that brings us to the next chapter, the period where the empire wasn't just, surviving, it was truly flourishing. This was the Golden Age, the era of the great emperors who took a fragile military conquest and turned it into this sophisticated, stable, and incredibly wealthy state. So you can think of it like this. Babur laid the foundation, but it was his grandson Akbar who was the real architect of the empire. He took the throne as a teenager and spent almost 50 years not just conquering land, but building the actual administrative and political structures to hold it all together. And crucially, he created this new, diverse ruling class that was loyal directly to him, which broke the power of the old regional clans. And one of the absolute keys to Mughal power was this brilliant economic move under Akbar, the Zabt system. See, instead of demanding tribute like crops or goods, the empire did detailed land surveys and then demanded a tax to be paid in standardized silver coins. This was a total game changer. It basically monetized the entire agricultural economy, forcing millions of peasants into a cash-based market to get the silver for their taxes, which massively increased the state's wealth and control. But Akbar's genius wasn't just about money and armies. He understood that to rule a huge, diverse place like the subcontinent, you needed to be inclusive. He famously held these debates with scholars from all different religions, Muslims, Hindus, Jains, Christians. He even tried to promote a new syncretic faith, the Dini-Yuahi, to try and bridge some of those divides. And his policies? They created a period of relative peace and stability that really fueled a massive economic boom.
Now fast forward to Akbar's grandson, Shah Jahan, and this is where the empire's cultural side just explodes. This was the golden age of Mughal architecture, giving us monuments we still marvel at today, and of course, the most famous of all, the Taj Mahal. But all this splendor came with a hefty price tag. The cost of these huge building projects and maintaining an unbelievably lavish court, well, it started to strain the imperial treasury. The income was enormous, but the expenses were getting even bigger. So this tug of war between amazing splendor and incredible strain, that really sets the stage for the next emperor, Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb. During his reign, the empire would stretch to its absolute maximum size, controlling nearly the entire subcontinent. But the very policies that fueled this expansion would also create the deep fractures that would lead to its collapse.
I mean, just look at that number. 4 million square kilometers. This is the absolute peak of Mughal territory. From Afghanistan in the northwest to Bangladesh in the east and way down into the Deccan Plateau in the south, it was a truly colossal state,
one of the largest and most populous in the entire world at the time.
And this is where we see a huge ideological shift. You can really see the difference between Akbar and his great-grandson, Aurangzeb. Where Akbar practiced religious tolerance and syncretism, Aurangzeb promoted a much more orthodox vision of Islam. He brought back the jizya tax on non-Muslims, which Akbar had gotten rid of, and his policies created real conflict with groups like the Sikhs, leading to the execution of their ninth guru.
And that really gets to the heart of the paradox of Aurangzeb's rule, right? While he was expanding the empire to its greatest size, his methods were sowing the seeds of its destruction. He spent the last 25 years of his life on campaign in the Deccan, a costly, draining effort to subdue the region. These endless wars completely emptied the treasury and pulled his focus away from the northern heartland, where imperial administration just began to crumble.
So, when Aurangzeb finally dies in 1707, the powerful, centralized empire he had commanded for nearly half a century began to fall apart. And fast. His successors were weak, the treasury was empty, and powerful forces both inside and outside the empire started to carve it up.
I mean, if you want a snapshot of the chaos that took over the Mughal court, this one fact says it all. In the years after Aurangzeb's death, a whole series of weak emperors became nothing more than puppets for powerful nobles. The once absolute authority of the throne just evaporated. In just over a decade, the stable structure of the empire had completely disintegrated.
And this timeline here, it just shows the step-by-step collapse. The first catastrophic blow comes in 1739. Nader Shah of Persia invades and brutally sacks Delhi, carrying off generations of accumulated wealth, including the famous Peacock Throne. This shattered Mughal prestige. By 1771, the emperor was a ruler in name only, basically being protected by the rising Maratha power. Then, the British East India Company began its takeover, starting with the super-rich province of Bengal. The final act came after the rebellion of 1857, when the British formally abolished the empire and exiled the last emperor.
So, after it's all over, after more than 300 years of rule, what's left behind? Well, the Mughal political structure was gone, but its economic, cultural, and administrative legacy is still deeply embedded in the fabric of modern South Asia. Okay, get ready for this number, because it is staggering. For much of the Mughal era, the Indian subcontinent was an absolute economic powerhouse, responsible for a full 25% of global manufacturing. Its textiles and spices were in high demand all over the world, pulling in a steady stream of silver and gold.
And if you break down that economy, it's actually really interesting. Yeah, agriculture was the base, but that manufacturing sector was remarkably large for a pre-industrial society. In fact, it was a larger share of the economy than it would be even under British rule in the early 20th century. That points to a really vibrant and sophisticated economy with tons of craft production.
But of course, the legacy goes way beyond just the money. The architectural style is one of the most recognizable in the world. Mughlai cuisine, that amazing fusion of South Asian and Central Asian flavors, is loved globally. The Persianized court language evolved into Hindustani, which is the basis for both modern Hindi and Urdu. And Akbar's centralized administrative model, well, that provided a blueprint for later states, including the British Raj, on how to govern the subcontinent.
And that really leaves us with a big final question to chew on. The Mughal state was basically a machine built for war and expansion. Its entire administrative system was designed to fund the military, and that military, in turn, conquered new lands to get more wealth from. So once that expansion stopped and then became a costly drain under Aurangzeb, was the decline inevitable? Was this a system that could only survive by growing?
So if you found this whole story of the Mughal Empire fascinating, you should definitely explore more of the region's incredible past in our South Asia history playlist. And hey, to make sure you don't miss our next summary, go ahead and subscribe to Notebook Summaries. Thanks for watching.